Listen, Jonathan, thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad that you're able to share your journey with us and talk a little bit about what's happened to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, this is a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So why don't we start right from the beginning, Jonathan, is kind of back up a little bit. What was life like? What did it look like before the loss of your limb?
Life was kind of all over the place. My story is kind of long leading up to my amputation, and it mostly involves falling into addiction. I fell into opiate like painkiller addiction from football injuries. Like my junior year in college down at Arizona State, which was around 2009, 2010. And then it evolved from there and turned into a heroin addiction. And there were times when I started to kind of battle the addiction and started to get into recovery and had a few years clean here and a few years clean there. But overall, the depths that the addiction took me were pretty incredible. Ultimately, leading up to the point where I was just in a really dark space, extremely depressed. The drugs had taken its toll on a lot of my body, especially both of my arms, from IV drug use and getting abscesses and things like that. And then ultimately leading up to a bone break, and then the bone got infected, osteomyelitis, they call it. And then ultimately it was either have it amputated or they assured me I would die within a few weeks if I didn't do that. So
Yeah, and a lot of people that I talk to share that same thing. And listen, addiction is really hard. It's hard to get off of anything. Like it doesn't matter what your choice of drugs is. You fall down, you get back up. You fall down, you get back up. Before you know it, you can beat it. Some people can beat it, but not everyone. Really proud of you that you did that, Jonathan. That's great that you've got your life going again. Listen, you and I talked before a little bit about this, so I know about your journey a little bit, but it is really dramatic and painful journey for sure. At what point did you feel like things really started to unravel for you, and what were some of the key turning points?
So there were multiple kind of, I guess, milestones or significant moments in that time between when I fell into addiction and when I lost my limb. I would say the first was um, in 2009, right before things kind of fell apart or started to fall apart. One of my really good friends I grew up with out here, and I'm from Aurora, Colorado. A lot of my friends, I guess, that didn't go off to college after high school that stuck around here fell into addiction years before I ever did. It got popular out here for a while, and I mean he and I were really good friends. I called his mom, things like that, and I got news just before summer break in 2009 that he had died of a heroin overdose. And I had friends pass away before, but never anyone quite like that. And so I went to his funeral, and I had actually already scheduled a study abroad where I would be living in Barcelona, taking a few college classes that summer, and literally a week after his funeral was scheduled to leave. And I don't think I really processed like the grief of it in the moment. And when I was in Spain, there would be certain nights where, my roommates and friends would go out, and I found myself kind of wanting to just isolate and be in like a really dark room. Looking back on it now, I realized that, I was grieving,
Yeah,
but I didn't really know what it was. And one of the best things that I found to kind of remedy that pain at the time was it is Spain, so it's not the prescription meds aren't quite as regulated as they are in America. So
right.
I could walk across the street to a pharmacy and get some type of opiate. And that's kind of what unlocked that connection in my head at the time of like when you feel sad or down and depressed, this kind of numbs those feelings.
Sure.
And so I think that's kind of where my brain first made that connection of like, this helps numb emotional pain, physical pain, everything. And then the next kind of significant event was after the addiction to the painkillers kind of got out of control. Um, and it switched over to heroin. There was a short period of time where I tried to address it. I started to see an addiction doctor and got on some meds to help with everything. Met a girl who eventually we um, got engaged. Well, one night we were in a hotel room. She had a drinking problem, and I had my substance abuse problem, my heroin addiction. But we were both very like partial to our own substances. When she drank, she just strictly drank, and when I used, I just strictly used. We didn't use each other's. But yeah, one night we were using our own substance of choice, and halfway through the night, I woke up and looked over at her, and she was covered in like these blue splotches, and I didn't really know what it was. I knew that she suddenly had just stopped taking her meds, and she was drinking and things like that. So I checked her pulse, and her pulse was strong, and I checked her breathing, and her breathing was good, and I was using, and I fell back asleep. And about an hour later, I woke up and looked over at her, and the blue splotches were gone. But when I went to go check her pulse, her skin was cold and very pale, and her joints were stiff. And I knew in the back of my mind that this was not a good situation, but something was telling me that I could make it right. And I put her on the floor and started giving her CPR while I called an ambulance. But when the paramedics showed up, they basically all just stopped as soon as they saw her and said I needed to get out of the room, that she was DOA. And dealing with that, that was when things really started to spiral because before that, I think I was just, I had some things here and there, but nothing that I couldn't overcome. But I think that was a little bit more than I could handle at the time. And things really spiraled after that because I was stuck in this mindset of just depression and
Yeah.
suicidal ideas and things like that. And yeah, eventually it got to the point where, and there's a lot in between there, and we can get into it later, but it got to the point where I was basically living out of my car with a girl, shoplifting to survive, and she got arrested shoplifting. I never really liked doing it. I always actually hated doing it, but she didn't mind it. So she would shoplift and I would sell it, and that's basically how we were surviving until one day she got arrested doing it, and the next day I'm in withdrawal, severe withdrawal, really sick. And I stole some merchandise from Best Buy. And another kind of long story short, and if you have time, we can go into it. But I ended up getting shot by a cop at a traffic stop because of that incident, and going to prison for 4 years. While I was in prison for those 4 years, that was when I really kind of started to get my head on straight, really started to kind of dive into what this whole addiction thing is all about, and got a big book sent to me, and things like that. And that was when I started to kind of want a better life, I think, for myself, and start to kind of heal a little bit. But I was also incarcerated. I didn't really have access to mental health care or anything like that.
Yeah.
So while I think I did start to kind of process some of that grief, it was definitely still there. And when I got out in 2017, my life really, really did improve. I stayed clean. I paroled to a sober living home just to kind of give myself a little bit of a extra safety net.
Yeah.
And it was while I was at that sober living home, I went to a an AA meeting one day, and I heard a guy speak, and I liked what he had to say. And so after the meeting, I asked him if he was available to sponsor, and he was. So we started to work together, and after a few weeks, he kind of presented me an opportunity. He said, I work in recovery. He was the house manager of like a treatment facility. And he said that he was looking for a new coworker, and I was initially really adamantly against it. Most of their clients were between ages like 18 and 25, all under one roof. It just didn't sound
Yeah.
appealing to me, especially having just gotten out of prison. But he convinced me to shadow him one day. So I did, and it honestly changed my mind. And that was kind of what gave me my first kind of glimpse into working in recovery.
Yeah.
And I did that for a few years, and yeah, life was getting great, and I started a new relationship, and that was going well. We moved in together, and this eventually got to the point where COVID was about to start, and our relationship was kind of starting to fall apart. And when it ultimately did, I realized that a lot of that trauma and grief from the past I really hadn't resolved, and
Right.
I went off the rails. I immediately went into like self-sabotage mode and suicidal. In my best solution to that was I'm just gonna go back to using, and then hopefully one day I'm not gonna wake up.
Right.
Um, and when you're using with that mentality, it's a little bit different because in the past when I was using, I never really, I mean, there were definitely dark moments where I didn't want to live. But I think overall, and especially your natural instincts kind of kick in, but I think overall, you're mostly just trying to numb whatever pain it is and then trying to feel the effects of the opiates. But when you're using with the intent of like, hopefully I don't get through this, hopefully I don't wake up,
Right.
you don't pay any mind to any of the damage you're doing to yourself. It's very careless and sloppy. And I was already really bad at as being an IV addict. I was horrible at it. And I started to sell as well. I started to sell heroin and cocaine. And then eventually I started to combine the two when I would use. And when you and I think I may have mentioned this before, but cocaine was a new thing for me. It like intensified the opiate effects, but it was also horrible to shoot up. I would miss all the time and get abscesses, and that's ultimately kind of what led to the te deterioration of the bone in my arm, just the abscesses and everything like that. And then ultimately the break and the infection and amputation. But from falling into addiction with the grief from my best friend growing up, and then the death of my then fiance, and then being shot and sent to prison, and then ultimately the arm. I feel like there's a lot of um, kind of
Drama.
yeah, a lot of moments that I can kind of point to answer your question, but
Yeah.
um, I think the most significant one was, witnessing the death of my then fiance,
Yeah.
because that really kind of,
Oh,
along
boy.
with the physical and mental addiction, that kind of really threw me into the mindset of just trying to sabotage myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to unpack, man.
Yeah.
So that question was really about like what did life look like before the amputation? And it didn't look very good. What I heard was a lot of addiction. Very easy to fall in addiction, by the way, to our listeners. Everybody kind of knows that opioids are everywhere. Even in the small towns that I grew up in, here in Canada that you see opioids everywhere. The other one is that there's a lot of listeners here that fall into alcoholism that way. But anyway, listen, I'm so sorry that you've gone through as much as you have. I really am. It's got to be hard. Uh, let me back up and turn my attention on your arm, though. You said that you said that it was amputated because it got infected. How kind of run me through like what happened? How did it get damaged in the first place?
Mhm. So the initial injury was due to the IV drug use. So as I was just kind of talking about, you
I
get very
see.
careless and don't really care about consequences when you're ultimately trying to harm yourself. And I still remember the day because it might have been one of the most painful feelings I've ever felt. But I when I so this is the arm that it went into. So what I was
Yeah,
injecting into kind of this side of it, and I hit the ulnar nerve, and I had never hit a nerve before. And the ulnar nerve kind of goes down the back, like the ditch of your forearm, and it ultimately kind of controls like your pinky and ring fingers and the backside of your forearm. Well, as soon as I hit that, I just intense, just lightning bolt of pain from the site of the injection all the way down to my pinky. And I looked at it, and it just kind of like almost immediately destroyed like everything from the point of
right.
injection all the way down to the tip of the pinky. Um, it took a little while for like the actual like flesh to kind of destroy, but almost immediately it like curled up the pinky and ring fingers where they were kind of stuck, clenched. Um, and my mindset at the time where as soon as I got over the pain, I didn't even care about the damage I had done to myself. I didn't even know the extent of the damage that I did to
Right.
myself. But what I did do is I went immediately to my other arm and tried it in this arm and did the exact same thing back to back,
Wow.
hit the ulnar nerve. So after I did that, when I left this arm alone from that point forward, the damage was done. I hit the ulnar nerve, everything like that. But it almost kind of created an open wound even from the point of injection all the way down. But I left it alone and I just kind of let it heal on its own. But on this arm, I didn't. That was what I kept on shooting into. And so to
Right.
kind of give you an idea of what it did, so that you can kind of see
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of the
Wow.
scarring. So just below my elbow was the point of injection, and it went all the way down. And you can see now my pinky and ring fingers are still paralyzed
Yeah.
from it.
Oh wow.
So that's essentially what happened.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
let this heal. That's just kind of how it healed on its own.
Yeah.
But this one I kept going into it, and eventually, I mean, it was. I had to delete the photos from my phone. It
Yeah.
was pretty gnarly. Uh-huh.
How
And
are
so
you how are you managing that right now with that? Like, that's a big change. You can't even scratch your nose with your left arm, right?
I'm pretty
Yeah.
managing. It was quite an adjustment, and I was pretty against even going through with it at first. When the doctors told me I either needed to get my arm amputated or die within a couple of weeks,
You were in a bad
um,
place. Yeah.
yeah, that almost sounded like a relief to me. So
Yeah.
finally an end to all this pain, you know.
Wow.
And I think I even remember I remember the day of my surgery. It was in the morning. And I was taking a shower before leaving, and in the shower, I think I even told myself like I was waffling back and forth out while I was in the shower, and should I go through with it? Should I not go through with it? If I don't, I can stop worrying about things and everything like that. And if I do, I got to figure out life with one limb and every or missing a
Yeah.
limb.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously ultimately I went through with it, but it was not an easy decision. And in fact, I was 2 hours late to my surgery
Wow.
because I really wasn't sure I wanted to go through with it. And ultimately when I did, first of all, I had huge family support. They've always really been supportive as long as I'm trying to help myself. You know, they learn
Right.
to have boundaries with me. Obviously, I broke a lot of trust in my addiction. But ever since kind of getting clean and actually trying to improve my life, my family will always be behind me if I'm doing that
Right.
100%. And so in this instance, I mean, I truly don't know how I would have survived most of the things I did without
Yeah.
them. And this was a big one. My dad drove into town to kind of help take care of me while I was staying here at my mom's. And yeah, my dad kind of convinced me of the morning that everything will be fine. And yeah, life today is dramatically better. Even
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
losing an arm and having a couple fingers paralyzed, not having that mental obsession and
Yeah.
constantly worried about being sick. If you don't, it's a horrible life.
Yeah.
And so even
You can see how healthy you look, right? Right. There's color in your face. I bet you didn't look like that, when you were addicted. I
no,
can
it's
guarantee
pretty
you.
easy to see.
I
Yeah, so
actually, I'm sorry. I'll cut you off. I cut you off. Go ahead.
no worries. To kind of more answer your question, so as far as what life looked afterwards, there were a lot of things that I was not expecting. Obviously, the obvious ones, I grew up riding motorcycles and video games, playing sports, things like that. Um, I don't know if those things will ever be possible again. I'm hoping so. I haven't given up on that, but it's a lot of things that I didn't really anticipate. One of the first things that I noticed was putting on pants, any type of pants that don't have
Yeah.
like an elastic
Yeah.
waistband. I have to keep them buttoned and then just kind of like try to wiggle into them already buttoned.
Yeah.
That was something I wasn't anticipating. Kind of a lot of things. The routine in the shower, that's definitely different. Trying to clean this
Yeah.
armpit is
Yeah.
quite the hassle. I'm
Yeah.
sure you can relate.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so there were some things that I didn't anticipate, but overall, I couldn't be happier that I went through with it. It feels silly sometimes to think that I r really came close to
yeah.
not going through with it, and I'm extremely grateful I did. You know, li life is can be
It's
difficult at
way
times,
way
for
better
sure.
probably now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to cut you off now, because there's a lot to unpack there again. I heard one thing that you said is that you didn't want to live again, and you were 2 hours late for your surgery because you wanted to die or you couldn't make up your mind. All the people that I've been talking to on the podcast here and our support group that we run, um, I hear the same story all the time, but the opposite. Everybody tells me I had no choice. I was either going to die or take my leg. Obviously, my leg. I was going to die because they were going to take my arms, and I went sepsis, but I told them to take my arms. You're one of the first people I've heard the opposite to that, and I'm so glad that you didn't go the opposite route. Trust me. Well, let me ask you this. So I'll move on a little bit because I want to drill into this. One thing you said to me when I interviewed you a few weeks back, you said that you were reaching a place of deep surrender, and that you meant that by mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I wasn't sure what you really meant by that. I don't know if you recall saying that or anything. Do you remember talking about that?
Uh, Vaguely, I would say that I've really kind of, especially just pretty recently, honestly, uh, the the control aspect of addiction and in life, feeling like you need to control everything, control the outcome. That's one of the biggest things to kind of get over in recovery is feeling like, first of all, you have control over the world, your life. There's so many things outside your control, but that I've always been the type of person who kind of obsessed over controlling my environment, controlling kind of the outcomes of things, and realizing, obviously life did not go even close to how I planned it, and kind of realizing that the chaos of the world, you kind of just have to lean into and embrace. I think that's kind of how my mindset is now today, with dealing with difficult people, dealing with difficult personalities, um, events that come up in life, tragedies, just trying to kind of like roll with the punches. There was a saying, I guess it's a pretty common saying. There's another recovery group called Recovery Dharma, and they kind of weave Buddhism into recovery. And one of the like common sayings is be like water, go around your obstacles, up, over, around, through, just kind of
Oh, I like
go with the
that. I
flow.
like that.
I
Yeah.
think it's a Bruce Lee quote, or maybe I could be wrong about that,
Uh,
but
I'm not familiar with it, but maybe our listeners are, but I really like that because you could go a long way in life just applying that, go around obstacles and be flexible and whatnot, right? So I like that.
definitely, yeah. And
Yeah.
and I noticed that when I'm trying to take that control back, when I'm trying to control things outside of my control, um, I get angry. I get angry when things don't go how I want them to go. And so that's like a big like red flag for me. If I feel myself getting angry at things, especially like on the road in traffic and other strangers driving and things like that, I have to realize that this is me just trying to control things
Yeah.
outside of my control, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, they're going about their business, but in your mind or in your head, you're playing a scenario out that's, horrible, right? Um,
Yeah,
and trust me, Jonathan, a lot of people do that, right? It's just how you react to it, like how you can what your actions are out of that, right? A lot of us think about it, right? Like why is that guy driving like that, or why is that person, whatever, right? And you just want to take control, but the logical thing to do is just kind of like let it go and keep moving, right? Recovery with addiction and trauma is really, really complex. And is there anything now that triggers you, Jonathan? Are you in a good place now? Do you think you've beat this thing?
Well, you're always cautious to say that you beat it in recovery or any type of recovery, substance abuse, physical recovery, mental health. Um, I don't know if anybody is actually fully cured or completely recovered, but I would say that the odds of me ever wanting to go back or ever actually even going back seem to be the lowest that they've ever been.
Good.
I don't want to come out and say like I will never use again, but ironically, it was one of the first things that my therapist had me do when I went to treatment after losing my arm was, it's kind of taboo in 12-step groups and things like that to say that you're recovered or be completely cured of this thing. It's a lifelong progressive
Yeah.
disease that you have to deal
Yeah.
with. So I understand that aspect of it. But I think he was trying to hammer home um the mental aspect of it, if you're wavering, if you're always leaving the door open just a tiny bit in your head of like maybe one day I can responsibly use like a normal person or whatever that looks like. If you're leaving the door open even just a tiny bit, then it's always going to be an option. And I think he was just trying to get me to take in that mentality of as soon as you think about like, should I use, could I use, would I ever use, shut it down immediately. I will never use again. So
Right.
I'm a little bit cautious to say I will never use again, but I've never been more confident that I won't before.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Hey,
easy when every single day when I look in the mirror and putting on my clothes and I see the consequences
right.
of what could happen. Um, the only reason that I continued to use was because I didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And before that, before when I was struggling with addiction, but wasn't necessarily suicidal, I would say that the biggest thing that kind of keeps opiate addicts going is the fear of the withdrawal.
Yeah.
The pain of going through withdrawal is so intense that honestly, most of opiate addiction is the constant frenzy of trying to find it before you get sick. And so you kind of fall into this mindset of if I can get over that sickness, then everything will be okay. And then you start to find out that it's a little bit more than that. Like, yeah, you can stop, but it's what's going on between your ears that seems to really be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
And so I think this time around, really kind of processing all the grief and trauma from my past. They even devoted a whole day on Wednesdays at that treatment center to trauma. They call it Trauma Wednesdays. So
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of work with professionals to kind of get through those things. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I
Uh,
suppose that it's always a possibility. And I've even thought about if I were to even try to go back, I don't even know how I would. It would be very
right.
hard with three fingers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have some
No.
safeguards in that sense, but I think overall it's the mental health aspect of it and continuing to work on it.
Yeah.
You can go to 3 meetings a day for an entire year, and some people do that and feel like you got this recovery thing down. You've been through all the steps. You have a
And they
sponsor.
fall into it again. Yeah.
Yeah, it can happen. And I've been victim to it as
You know,
well.
yeah, I'm glad you have the this like you sound like you have the support now as well. Like you have a stronger support system to keep you away from that. You look at your arm, that's going to keep you from it. When I heard that in my mind, there's a lot of diabetics out there, and they lose their limbs, including myself. And the reason why you lose your limbs is because your sugars are too high and you don't control your sugars and you don't take your insulin or your medication. Well, there's consequences to that, just like you said. But doctors, everybody, your friends, everybody will tell you, watch your sugars, keep your sugars down, keep your sugars down, and you. don't, you know that you have to do it, but it's almost like an addiction. You can't do it. You just can't do it, and it goes on and on and on, and before you know it, you're amputating your legs. I'm not saying that diabetics are like addicts in the same way, but I'm saying like it's really hard to change behaviors, right?
It's
So,
extremely hard. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Listen, turning our attention to your prosthetics. I notice that you're not wearing your prosthetic right now. You
Mhm.
have one, right? For your
I
arm.
do.
It's some kind of like powered one. Can you just describe that and tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more?
yeah. As far as the prosthetics go, um, the first one that they make you get is the body powered prosthetic. In that one, um, you put on kind of like a neoprene sleeve to help it from sliding.
That one must be really uncomfortable to wear though, like especially in the summertime when you're sweating and things like that. It must be pretty tough to wear.
But when you take the little neoprene sleeve off, I mean, you literally have to pour the sweat
Yeah.
out of it. But honestly, the straps for your back, that actually kind of makes it a little bit more comfortable because it takes a lot of
Oh,
the
okay.
weight
Yeah.
off of it. But as far as like functionality of it goes, it's not great. You flex your back to bend the elbow, and then you kind of have to snap a little pulley thing to get the elbow
Oh,
locked so you can open and close the hand. It's a lot.
yeah.
So got that, and then started to work on getting this electric prosthetic. So this is kind of what that
Oh,
looks
that
like.
that looks cool.
Um, I do like it. I think it's very, very cool. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But it was when I had them designing it, I really kind of like the idea of not having straps like a backpack and more of kind of like
Yeah.
an actual just kind of arm that you can stick on like this. So the solution that they did for that was you can kind of see these like strings on the
Oh,
side
yeah. Yeah.
and that little dial up on the top.
It just dials it tight around your
Yeah,
arm.
you push it in there and then you kind of twist the dial to tighten it down. But since it is kind of big and pretty heavy, you have to
Yeah.
really crank down on it, which kind of makes it uncomfortable. The little sensors on the inside are supposed to line up with the bicep and tricep. The technology of it is really cool. They did
Yeah.
something called TMR surgery, which is where they take I can't remember, it's like trans something.
Yeah.
They take the nerves that used to connect to my lower arm and connect it to the two heads of the bicep and the three heads of the tricep. And so these little sensors on the inside of this thing here are supposed to kind of line up with the bicep and tricep so that when you flex your muscles in certain ways, that's kind of how it
Yeah.
operates. It's a little bit different from how I thought prosthetics would work. I always just kind of, this is just me being naive, but I always just kind of thought a prosthetic would just be almost like a second arm. You can still do everything that
Right.
you
Right.
used to do. Unfortunately, it's not like that, especially if you're missing your elbow. That seems to be a pretty big factor in how much you can actually do with an upper limb prosthetic. Um, but yeah, this is it here. It's got
Yeah.
a really, really
How
cool
how
hand and everything.
how did the hand move? Can you control the hand in any way?
So yeah, and that's the different combinations of how you flex your bicep
Action
and
muscle, yeah.
tricep.
Okay.
The actual hand here, let me see here.
Oh yeah.
Battery might be running low. So each digit on the
Yeah.
hand can change, and same with the thumb. And then you actually have to kind of manually change how the thumb lines up in order to
Right.
do different grip
Grips.
positions
Yeah.
based on the combinations of like flexing your bicep and tricep. But it'll do different grips. But honestly, as I've been kind of healing from everything physically and mentally, obviously I wanted to get it, but I haven't really used it to the
Use
point
it.
where I'm comfortable with it. I haven't really had any applicable
Yeah.
uses for it.
You're not
As
the
I've been,
only. you're not the only one with upper body prosthetics. I hear that a lot. You know, I can't wear it all the time, Kev. I wear it when I go out, in public or maybe to a wedding or something like that. But everyday life, I kind of, figure things out. So, yeah, I mean, it's come a long way, but it's still got a long way to go, these prosthetics.
That, that's for sure. It has come a long way, but it seems like things are progressing really, really fast. I see some really fascinating
Yeah.
university studies working on prosthetics. There was this one I saw 8 or 9 months ago. I forget which university it was, but they were hooking up a prosthetic to a guy's brain. They actually had
Yeah,
all these signals up to his brain,
I've seen
and
that.
they blindfolded him. And from across the room, they would touch different fingers on the prosthetic, and he could tell you what fingers they were touching.
Uh,
Is pretty crazy stuff.
Isn't that something, eh? With all the AI coming out, they're going to put chips on us, and I don't even know if we'll be human again
Yeah, we're just gonna be a
anymore.
bunch of robots, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, let's back up a little bit. The one thing, that bothers me because of my amputations, certainly did in the beginning, is I can't do a lot of things that I love to do. And that's what I thought anyway. And now I'm changing my mindset. It's like, well, why can't I do those things? And I'll give you an example. Um, I used to ride bikes a lot, mountain bikes, and go trail on the trails and whatnot. And I really miss it. And I thought, oh, I'll never ride a bike again, bilateral. I sold my bikes, and now I'm thinking, well, why did I do that? There's no reason why I can't ride a bike. And the other one is my golf, my golf. I will not sell my golf clubs. I don't care, but I haven't been out golfing, and that's one of the goals I've set by the end of summer. I want to get out and play a game of golf. I may not walk the course, but I'll be able to, like, hit the ball and swing. My question to you is, like, is there anything like that that you really, really are going to miss? And I would imagine your football career has really played on your mindset too, right?
Yeah, but at a certain point, I feel like pretty much everybody knows when their like playing days are over. But as far as like just any type of athletics, pickup games, things like that, yeah, that I do kind of mourn
Yeah,
missing those things. But like yourself, I grew up riding bikes, dirt bikes as well, motorcycles.
right.
I really miss that, and I'm hopeful that that will still be an option one day. Um, the biggest thing that I've noticed that really it can affect me even in the moment sometimes is I grew up taking piano lessons. I think I took
Oh,
12
wow.
years of piano lessons and I was pretty good. Like I performed at a few concerts and things
Oh,
like that. And obviously that's not an option anymore. And even sometimes listening to music and there's like a piano in it or even just like
yeah,
classic piano music. Like I appreciate it, but it's such an interesting experience because I can look at a piano and recognize it. I can look at any key and tell you what key it is. I can read music fluent, but knowing that I can't, like I can read what's in front of me. I know what to do. I know what keys to press, but I just physically can't do it. It is a frustrating thing. And I don't know if technology will ever get to the point again where I can use all 10 fingers like I used to. But yeah, there's that. Also,
yeah,
yeah, I wasn't a huge gamer, but I did enjoy certain video games and just being able to turn off your mind for a little while. Obviously can't really play video games.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say those are probably the biggest ones. The piano,
That,
motorcycles for sure. Video games. I even, in treatment and things like that, playing cards, you realize that it's pretty hard to, get your hand together and throw a card with
right.
just one hand, So it really does affect just so much.
So many things. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like the piano one really got me when you said that. I never even thought of that. Because my son's a musician, and he plays guitar and steel guitar and whatnot. If he lost his hands, my God, that kid would be totally lost. His whole life would be lost. And I can't imagine putting all those years in learning the piano and then not be able to play that. It must be hard. mentally.
It's difficult.
Yeah,
I neglected it for years, obviously in my addiction. So there's that, if it was really that
yeah,
important to you,
right,
then
right.
maybe you would have.
Hey, listen, we've only got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to wrap up with a couple other last questions here.
Okay.
You mentioned family earlier, and I'm just wondering how have things impacted your relationships because of, specifically because of the arm and the amputation? I know the drugs definitely you lost some trust in your family and friends, probably lost friends. Same thing with your arm. Do people who still come around, and are people really true to your friendship after your
Um,
amputation?
well, most of my friendships and relationships today have are newer since losing my arm.
Right.
When you're an isolated drug addict, not too many people really want to hang out with you. I get that.
Yeah.
So I still have a few friends from like high school. But and it's also part of life. You get
Yeah.
married, you have kids, and you just
Yeah.
life gets in the way. But as far as like my relationship with my parents, uh, yeah, they couldn't be more supportive. But one of the difficult things for me, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, was that and it's probably why my addiction got as bad as it did was I always had a hard time asking for help and accepting other people's help.
Yeah.
I was always the guy who could figure out a solution to something, I was very confident in my abilities to figure out problems and is to get through hardships and things like that. And when I came up against addiction, that was my first time in my life ever coming up with something so powerful. I had no clue that, this thing couldn't be beaten though just with sheer willpower, like I felt like I have been doing with everything else. And so it took me years to not only accept help, but to even admit that this thing was out of my control.
Yeah.
And so it was a long battle of, I guess, humbling myself to the point where I can actually ask for help, tell people when I'm not doing well, and then accept help when it's offered. I didn't even think about it most of the time. If somebody offered help, it was almost just an immediate, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, and so, my parents trying to help me. I remember in rehab after losing my arm because I went to a treatment center almost immediately after the amputation surgery. And there, everybody's very helpful, and it was a learning curve for sure, trying to accept other people's help because I just wanted to feel independent, and it took a long time to finally learn that asking for help, telling somebody that you're not doing well, and accepting help have nothing to do with how strong of a person you are. Matter of fact, most people who can ask for help and tell somebody that they're struggling are stronger than most people. So I think once I kind of learned that it's okay to say you're not doing well. It's okay to accept other people's
Yeah.
help, and it's okay to ask for help. It actually makes you a stronger person to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that was when that really kind of shifted things
Yeah.
with my parents, with everybody.
Yeah. Definitely. I like that. You're stronger asking for help. Yeah. So going back to your arm though, did you ever find like people they don't invite you to a card game, or they're going to a concert or something, and they don't want you to see the piano or whatever? Is there things that they just don't include you in anymore because of
Um, It's possible. If that is the reason, nobody has had, the gall
oh,
to tell me straight
yeah,
out. But I will say that, I've been single for a few months now, and even before the surgery, that was a real concern of mine. Will I be attractive to women
yeah,
anymore? And I will say that almost my expectations and reality were completely different. I expected kind of what you're saying for people to kind of maybe not want to hang out with me because I maybe can't do everything that they can do, or
right,
visually it maybe
yeah,
there's a lot of reasons why you might be nervous to form connections in the
yeah,
future
yeah,
if you're losing a limb or know you're losing a limb or have already lost a limb. But what I've experienced has been almost the opposite. And maybe It's maybe it's just because I women seem to be a little bit more empathetic than men, but it
Yeah,
seems like women in the dating world at least are much more willing to overlook something like that and even want to offer any type of help or
yeah,
assistance in any way that they can. So I'm sure that there's certain things that friends are doing that maybe you can't be included in, but I feel like overall um,
yeah,
the acceptance that I feel from just people in general and um, people in recovery, that I feel like it's been um, pleasantly surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised to say
yeah,
that people just seem to be much more accepting. It was a little bit rocky at the beginning because I didn't like people pointing it out.
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people watching this can relate to, kids have no filter, and when you're around
yeah,
kids that point it out. And it used to upset me. I dated a girl who had two young kids, and they would always point it out, and it always upset me. And I didn't really know why it upset me, that they're just curious. But
yeah.
overall, I would say that it's been a nice surprise to know that people seem to be much more accepting, and even if they are doing something that I might physically can't do, I've never had anybody disinvite me from something
Right.
just
Okay.
because of
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked because I've heard that a couple times from people in upper body. It's like I can't do all these things that I used to be able to do, and they've lost friends over it because they don't get invited to, even dinner parties and things like that. But anyway, I was just curious. Listen, last question from me anyway. You gonna write a book?
Yeah, I know we spoke about that.
Well,
I'm planning on it.
I mean,
I
it's
do I do want to. I think there's enough in there to make a compelling book. I want to.
how you can overcome all this stuff. And I think it'd be really helpful, not, from many perspectives, addiction to limb loss, right? Hey, listen, Jonathan, really good to talk with you. But before we go, I want to ask you, is there anything that you have left out that you want the audience to hear before we go? Any last thought?
I can't think of anything else. As far as the adjustment from life before to life now, I found that you actually have to grieve the loss of a limb almost
Right.
like a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I did several sessions with the therapist of that exact process. I honestly felt like it was really silly at first and kind of unserious. But I realized that that's an important
Absolutely.
aspect of this whole thing. That there's your life before and there's your life after.
Yeah.
And while I try to make it as as similar as I can, I try to still do everything that I possibly can. The reality of it is that I just simply can't.
Yeah.
And so to actually go through a grieving process and process, your former life, and then kind of I feel like that kind of led me to be excited about this new life.
Wow, that's deep. God, I could talk to you all day long. I really enjoyed it. Our time's up, and I really appreciate your time, Jonathan. Okay, thanks a lot.